everyone to our quick Byte webinar today entitled To Become Better Teachers, Let's Track What We Teach, presented by Mr. Ermie, Director of Client Solutions here at ExamSoft and formerly Program Manager for Assessment and Evaluation at The Ohio State University of College of Medicine. Before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have specific questions throughout the presentation, we encourage everyone to type them through the questions feature of the GoToWebinar control panel at any time. We'll have a chance to answer all questions at the conclusion of the webinar. Also, at the conclusion of the presentation, you should have a quick survey pop up for you. We encourage everyone to fill that survey out if possible. It's just 5 questions, so we can continue to provide relevant content at all of our presentations. And yes, as a heads up, all attendees will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded webinar in the next couple of days. Please feel free to share those with your colleagues and peers. We'd also like to let everyone know that we have 2 additional Quick Byte webinars occurring this week. Tomorrow's, May 21st, is entitled Help, I Need to Write an Assessment, and Thursday's, on the 22nd, is entitled The Life Behind Data. To register for these webinars or any other upcoming presentation, please visit us at learn.examsoft.com/resources, or you can stay up to date on all of our events by following us on LinkedIn or Twitter. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Eric. Thank you so much for attending, and please enjoy the webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you've ever attended any of my other webinars or presentations, you will know that if I'm anything, I'm long-winded. So 15 minutes, let's try and cram this all in. I'll go quickly, but hopefully not too quickly that you miss out on some things, and hopefully you'll be able to take some great things away from today's presentation. We're going to start with, how would you start doing laying out a criteria to categorize questions, to be able to track what you need when you teach. There's lots of different things that could be tracked. There's a million different options. If your system is our system, or if you're considering our system, we have unlimited categorization within our system. So the possibilities are endless. So we're going to talk about where to start, the different constituencies within your institution, whether it's your students, your faculty, or your administrators, and what they need, and what, sorts of tagging things you can do to help give them the reports and data that will be most valuable to them. And I'll show you a sample of a kind of a good starting spot and a quick way to help your faculty get going with categorization. So where do you start? There's a lot of possibilities. The first thing I would always recommend to take a look at are 2 things. One is your board exams. If you're from a nursing program or a pharmacy program or a med program, anything really that has a licensure exam at the end, there are some unique components and characteristics to those exams. There are certain things that they will give you and your students feedback on as far as performance goes after they've taken the exam. And that's a nice place to start to get some core categories to build around. The other thing is that your curriculums are also somewhat unique, and you have different things that are integrated in different ways, and you may have a certain way of teaching certain things. Look for those unique areas in both your board exam and your curriculum, and use those as a starting point for your internal, what you need for your school, and your external, what you need to validate and what you want to judge yourself against and what you're striving towards. And those 2 things aren't necessarily going to be foolproof, but you have to start somewhere. So what is unique? Frequently, when it comes to board exams, question types and styles are unique in that they have either an exam that is all a certain type of question, or there's a certain way they ask things. Maybe it's a longer vignette style question, whereas your curriculum may have some longer vignette style questions and some questions that aren't that way at all. They're shorter, more factoid type questions. So tracking your question types and styles internally can help you start to identify some things. If you're taking a look at your board exam and you notice that there is a single type or maybe a couple types of items that are used, track your performance on all your different item types so that you can start looking at how your students are doing on just the types you use in your curriculum that correlate to the board exam. Obviously, their performance on the other types of questions is important too, but it's a nice starting point to take a look at how are they doing on the styles of questions they're going to see on the boards and only on those styles, because it might give you a slightly better indicator of how prepared they are for the boards and how they're going to perform. Also, take a look at the cognitive domain distribution of your items. So you may have a lot of knowledge level questions, maybe some understanding level questions, and a few application questions. And that might be the breakdown within your exams. But when you take a look at what students need to best succeed going forward, or what they're going to be answering when it comes to licensure exams, those are usually going to be higher level application type questions. And so again, giving your students the feedback of knowing how they're doing on the types of questions or the cognitive domains of the types of questions that they're going to see on the board exam can be really, really helpful feedback, and also can help you start to get to how well are my students learning these things? Do they really actually understand it, or can they just spit all the facts back at us? And for a curriculum, being able to know what your breakdown is. When I was at Ohio State, we took a look at this, and one of the things we found was when we first categorized all our questions, we had a 3.5 to 1 ratio of fact knowledge level questions to vignette application style questions. That wasn't the ratio we were looking for, but it wasn't until we categorized that we were really able to pull it out. In addition, your curriculums are probably broad. You have lots of different things that you're responsible for, from the behavioral sciences side, patient interactions, whatever it might be. And because those things are broad, they aren't all tested necessarily on that single licensure exam. Maybe there's a specific content focus for your licensure exam. So that's one other thing that you want to make sure you're tagging those content areas that are broken out by your licensure exam. No matter what program type you're from, if you tag by those things, it'll give you a better indicator of your students' performance, readiness, and give them that nice feedback as well. So your different constituencies, your administrators and your faculty, they all need different things. For your students, a post-exam report that tells them what they were strong on and what they were weak on, what learning outcomes do I really need to focus on, might be the most important thing for them, as well as board preparation. They're always thinking about board preparation. From the day they walk in, they're worried about passing that board exam. So those things might be the most important to your students, but for your faculty, maybe it's curricular mapping and learning objective coverage and getting some data that feeds back to their courses and enables them to do some course improvement. That might be what they need. Your accreditation standards and your competency tracking, curricular monitoring are really, really important for administrators who have to deal with the accreditation bodies as they come in. And so each constituency maybe needs something different, and learning objectives, for example, they can cover multiple constituencies. Your students obviously like them because it ties them back to the exact content they need, but your faculty need them as well. So some things will be only for one area, other things will cover multiple constituencies, but they all need slightly different things. And the nice thing is that you don't have to leave any of them out. The way the reporting works, especially in our system, is that you can customize it. You can release to the students only the categories they need or important to them, while at the same time getting the reports for your administrators and faculty that cover their interest points. So they're all customizable, and you can tag unlimitedly. Item banking and organization. This is more of just kind of a nuts and bolts type thing. It's sometimes just easier to navigate your curriculum and your assessments, etc., when you've got these sort of tags. So we recommend tag them with what assessment they're going to be used on, or maybe what block and course they came from as you're trying to track your items. Another thing is that you can use categories to assign faculty members for quality improvement. So if you've got a group of questions that you'd like to have reviewed by faculty members, you can go ahead and toss some categories on there that says, Dr. Jones review, and that way those people can log into the system and see only the questions you want them to take a look at and improve and do some quality improvement work with. And then also what faculty member wrote each question is really a key one, both from a logistical and organizational standpoint of keeping all the items straight. And if somebody were to, leave your university and go somewhere else and you have to replace them, you know exactly where that faculty member's items were, and you can pass them on to the new person teaching that content and give them a kind of a kickstart in getting started with their assessment. But also for the students, they'd love to know exactly, if I miss all of a certain faculty member's questions on an exam, if there's multiple faculty members writing an exam, then it's a great thing for me to be able to tie back and go to that person and ask them for help. For the student feedback, tying each individual question back to specific learning outcomes is so important. Now, you may have to do it. It depends on how your curriculum works. You may have to tie your course, your program, and your institutional level learning outcomes to each question to get all the data out you need. Or you might have a system where, the way your learning outcomes are developed, your course learning outcomes are linked to program learning outcomes, are linked to institutional outcomes. So maybe you only need to link that bottom layer and it'll connect to the rest of the map for you. But whichever way you want to do it, it provides really, really great feedback for your students and for your faculty members. If a certain learning outcome is particularly struggling, this will give them the feedback to know, okay, I'm going to take a week away from this other topic and spend it on this one in order to get these things straightened out. Or maybe it's a day, or maybe it's you have a TA run a review session on this, or a peer review session with the students before the exam on a particular learning outcome that they're struggling with. But you can get very intentional with your improvement and your strategies around those sorts of things. And for students, knowing exactly what content to go look at rather than I got an 80%, what's the 20 I missed, is also very helpful. Also, tag each question with an appropriate licensure exam subject area. Multiple subject area tags are also sometimes acceptable. I know in medicine there's a lot of questions that could be considered cardio and pathology, or physiology and GI renal, or something like that. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. And if you want to tag multiple ones, that's okay too, because you don't want to get to 5 or 6 or 7 because they're really not all being tested in a question. But if there's multiple, tag them. But getting to those licensure exam subject areas begins to develop a map for your students. And that map for your students will show them across time how they're doing on all the different subjects that pertain to their license exam. And when they get done with your curriculum and they're taking that 6 or 8 weeks, however long you give them, to go study, they know, okay, these are my strengths and these are my weaknesses across time, significant numbers of questions that really tell me this is my true performance, and guides my learning and guides my studying as I prep for those boards. Undo your integration. Not in the form of teaching, not in the sense of undoing all that work you did to reform your curriculum and things like that, but there are threads and topic and subjects within your program that are now longitudinal, that there's a little bit of them in every block or every course or across multiple years of a program. And that's a great way to teach those things. And integrated learning is very, very important, I think, as we all know, and has been the trend for years now. But you don't want to lose the ability to know whether or not your students are really truly understanding those things. So anything that is a threaded or integrated thing in your curriculum, tag those questions with those threads, with those topics, with those subjects, so that you know across time, hey, we integrated anatomy into every one of our blocks, and 5 blocks in here, we're looking like our anatomy is 15% performance below where we were when it was its own standalone course. We need to do some course correction here. Don't wait till you get to the end and find that out later by, students struggling with different things on licensure exams, etc. Pick out those integrated things and provide the feedback to your students and your faculty on how each of those threads are doing. Categorize questions by cognitive domain, we talked about at the top, and type as well. Those are really, really important. And then the last one here is by their core competency. Almost all health sciences schools have some core competencies these days that they're assessing all students towards. And one of the more difficult things with competency-based assessment is across time monitoring performance in a particular competency and building up their performance to say, are they on a trajectory towards meeting minimal competency? And across time, can we measure enough assessment in the very specific parts that are just this competency to know in a real meaningful way whether our students are strong or weak in this competency? And we can help you do that. And tagging those questions with the core competency is the start of that. So a simple outline. Pick out what's important to you. Certain things are going to be completely meaningless to you and your program. This is just kind of a suggested framework for getting started. But pick out some item and banking and organizational type tags. Definitely do the faculty owner, course and program learning objectives, whatever's going to be more meaningful to your faculty and to your students. Board subject areas, cognitive domain, question type, and accreditation standards. And really, accreditation standards sometimes can be just actually tracking all the rest of these things can satisfy some accreditation standards. So maybe you don't need to tag all of those. But that's a suggested outline. So with 1 minute to go here, let me give you a sample breakdown. This is a sample of the categorization system that I used when I was at Ohio State. We tried to break it down for our faculty, make it really simple. They had this little half sheet in front of them when they would categorize their questions, and they could go through and quite simply pick a block, write in the name of the author of the question, and then choose. which question type, which general area. We numbered all these things. So all they were doing was punching in a certain number, and we would know what category they needed. And then the learning outcome list was obviously considerably longer because we had a lot of learning outcomes, and those were numbered individually. So, it's a real quick reference guide, something that as you decide what you want these columns to be, what areas are you going to categorize in your system, you can set up the options for your faculty to make it easier on them to do the categorization. And making it easier for them is really going to be the key to getting a successful system off the ground. Last thing, where do we fit in? As I've been mentioning, unlimited categorization of exam questions within our system, personalized student post-exam reports, faculty post-exam reports, administrative post-exam reports, and longitudinal analysis of performance, taking a look at their performance in all these different categories across multiple exams, multiple types of assessment, so you get a really 360-degree view of your curriculum and your student performance. Retroactive data from question tagging. If you're one of our clients on the line right now, I just want to let you know it's not too late. If you start tagging questions today, you will get data going back to the very first time that question was ever used in our system. And the Student Longitudinal Progress Dashboard. It's a feature, again, if you're a client on the line, you can have it turned on for free. You just call your account manager. Or if you're a prospect, our Student Longitudinal Progress Dashboard is something that's in our student portal. They can log in, they can see their performance on all their categories across time. Every time they take an exam where those categories are used, it's going to update that dashboard and show them how many assessments that category appeared in, how many items on those assessments appeared in, and how they performed versus how their peers performed. So with that, I got done in just over time, 16 minutes. It's about as fast as I could possibly talk. If you've got any questions, we did build in some time here at the end for questions. Feel free to toss those into the GoToMeeting chat window, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Eric. Looks like we've already got one. We're going to open this up for a couple of questions. Again, this is a very quick webinar, so we don't want to take up too much time. But if you have any more specific questions that we don't get time to answer today, you can email those to Eric. His address is on the screen, or you can also send them to info@examsoft.com. Okay, first question we have is, how did you make it easy for faculty to tag the questions in all the categories? Did they do it directly in ExamSoft, or did they do this in a different platform?
It was 50-50. Half of them went into ExamSoft and just tagged the questions themselves. The other half of them would take a Word document printout of their exam and literally just write let me go back to my screen here, they would write in the little code. So would write in 1, a name, 2, 1, 5, and 1603. And they would just write those beneath each question, or some of them would type them in Word beneath each question. They would send them back to our assessment personnel. Sometimes I'd even have student workers just go into the system and tag them. So some of our faculty did it themselves, and some of them we assisted, but they had to do the tagging. It was just a matter of whether they were in the system doing it or did it on paper, and then we moved it into the system for them.
Perfect. Next question is, what is the maximum number of tags you can put on a question?
It is unlimited. If you really want to drive yourself crazy, you could go up 30, 40, 50 tags. I don't really think that's a good idea. We had these 6 required ones you see on the screen, and sometimes we would use 2, so if maybe a couple of USMLE subject areas, occasionally we would add some other things that we wanted to research internally within our curriculum. But I would say 6 to 10 is about right if you want to really, really be thorough. Now, to get started, it might just be you want to tag it with a few simple things. Let's go with a question type and a board subject area, maybe a learning outcome from the curriculum. Then you can start to dig a little bit deeper in. It really has to be what works for you, but start with what's going to be most meaningful for you and work up. Again, it's all retroactive, so you can do as much as you want, but if you bite off too much at the beginning, you could doom your project from the get-go.
Great, thank you. Looks like we've got one last question, and then we're going to go ahead and call it a day, folks. Last question is, how does ExamSoft work with learning management software in the back end?
So it depends on which one you have. We have, for instance, with Blackboard integration available so that you can move your students and your courses from Blackboard to us seamlessly without having to re-enter them, and move your scores and grades and things like that back and forth from the scoring section of our software back into the gradebook. If you have some other LMSs, it really depends on just which one it has. We have different capabilities, and we're constantly developing more capabilities. We have some more integrations for other LMS systems that'll be coming out late this year, early next year. So we do have some customizable exports so that you can customize the export in our system to be in whatever type, format, whatever else it might be to meet the needs of the system you're sending it to. So you can customize that within our software, populate your data to that format, and then export it if need be. So we've tried to create some customization in there to help you with that integration piece.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. That's all the time we have for today, you guys.